just so you know, I don't get paid enough for this. I'm going to have to go home now. They were like, what do you mean? I was like, I never thought I'd see it. I care about people. I want people to be comfortable. And I'm not like a top director by any stands, but I've made $20,000 in it for a day and worked multiple days.
Today, we're weighing in on Kanyessa McMahon's Weigh In. Hey, everybody, I'm Maureen Aladdin, and this is my podcast, Weighing In on the Weigh In, where I speak to dynamic women behind the scenes in the entertainment industry and find out what they did to land their current career position. I first heard about today's guest from a 2013 feature in Black Enterprise magazine. And I remember thinking to myself, who is this cool and young, I might add, Black female making these major moves in the film industry with her own production company suddenly there? Kanyessa McMahon's Bachelor of Arts in Photography from Pratt Institute and 2 graduate degrees from New School in Media Studies and Media Management make her a triple threat in the ever-changing world of mass media. However, her experience working both in the US and globally with top-tier athletes and entertainers is where she really cut her teeth. Kanyessa has over 12 plus years of experience working with the world's leading brands in sports, lifestyle, and youth culture. She has been instrumental in helping to shape their voice and in creating authentic content and marketing campaigns that have been uber successful. Clients have included Nike and Adidas, for which she produced and directed 450 digital films, I Am Other, Estee Lauder, Spotify, New York State, Ford, Disney, NFL, Red, YouTube, Universal Music Group, and MTV. When not working, Kanyessa is busy basking in the companionship of her husband Liam and her son Dashiell Tennessee Sharkey. Please go and follow this amazing woman on Instagram at KANYESSA. I'm Maureen Aladdin. Thank you, Kanya. Welcome to the show.
I love your voice. You took it to a new place. Hello and welcome.
East Coast, West Coast, across the pond, all places you've been. Tell me about young Kanya.
Yeah, so I have I'd call like a Black hippie mom. My earliest years, she was a background singer. She was, a dancer. And it was just the two of us, which gave us a lot of flexibility. Or she met a man on the street and was like, I'm going to move to London. And here comes my child. There's also that part. He's my stepdad. They're not married anymore. But whatever. Point is, it's flowing with life. But I was born in New York City. I always joke that one of the only people probably born on Park Avenue. I was born in a birthing center in Manhattan on Park Avenue. And sounds rich, but it's giving weird 80s delights. My original live birth document that I recently saw, a little bit of a detour, but hilarious, is my mother. I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, there's my middle name. There's a rogue, because it's handwritten because it was a birthing center. And I'm like, oh, there's a rogue capital in my middle name. Oh, there's an Enye, and the Enye is over an A. So I call my mother and I say, I am 40 years old. Excuse me, what is this name that's here? What is this? How am I unaware of these rogue letters? And the Enye, thus the N part that's over an A. What does that even do? And she goes, it was the 80s, which is her default for all things. I was in New York until I was 2. Then I went to LA because, as I told you, as a 2-year-old in New York, I was unimpressed by the New York subways, but they had their own little je ne sais quoi, but I called it trash.
Je ne sais stink.
My mom said I looked at her. We were on the G train. She said I turned to her and went, Mommy, why do we live in a trash can? And she called my grandparents and was like, my kid is like, So we moved to LA and I was there for a couple years. And then my mom went to London. She saw a man on the street. He wooed her with a rose. These are the things that as a woman of 2023, we know better. Some good-looking guy that's way too young for you rolls up with a rose like, hey, mama. We say no, we don't. What my mom did is she definitely moved herself and her child to London. This is how we then get all of my lovely Alcester siblings, who are iconic beacons of light in the world.
So wait, how many of there are you? Is it 3?
My mom's side, there's 4 of us.
Okay.
Sage, and Ama. Paloma is a plus size model. Like they call her a supermodel. It happened. It's very crazy when that's your sibling.
Nice.
I was watching the Vogue World or whatever it was last year, and they were like, okay, now here come the supers. And I'm like watching, and I looked up and I went, where are the supers? That's my little sister. And then someone was like, she is a super. I was like, what the? What do you mean she's a super? And it was like, this person, that person, Paloma. I was like, very disoriented. The one thing I will give my mom is that, it's something that I always lean back on, just even being a mother now, is that, she has not 1 ounce of shame when it comes to opportunities for us. We went to the best schools. We had to get into them, obviously. And, you can't just get a scholarship because you're just like cute. But so we had to be able to keep up. But she has any opportunity or camp or thing we have ever wanted to do. I've never doubted that I could go or do whatever I wanted to. Be like, oh, I want to go to Paris. My mom would go, hey, get into the program and we'll figure it out. And then I'd get in the program. She's like, I've got $0, but hold on. One of the best things she told me was when I first got my son goes to a private school in New York. I know, don't boo hiss me, but that's just the way it is. And
no, I totally wouldn't. My nieces and nephews went to the lycée, so college education, money.
I remember having this moment of, you as a person, be it your friends or otherwise, you want everyone to do better than you. So you have a challenge. You don't want people to have that challenge, or you have, so my mom had $0, but we always went to great schools and she made it work. And so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, so now I'm an adult who makes more money than my mom. I don't make $0. I'm also not rich. So I'm like, okay, my son can go get access to these schools. And I'm like, wait, but now am I even, I'm not going to, I'm not going to be able to afford this, but then he's going to have less than me, even though I have more than my mom. And they sent a thing out about scholarship amount. And I go, Mom, they gave me the scholarship. Like, I can't afford this. And she was like, she goes, right, exactly this. Thank you for your initial offer. We're not there yet. I said, Mother, what? Excuse you? She goes, no. She goes, right. Thank you for your initial offer. We love the school. My son is amazing. He will be an asset. Thank you for this initial offer, but we're not there yet. I would like you to, we still have a gap to fill. And I was like, okay, what do I have to lose? I sent that. And all of a sudden I got basically like what I asked for, short, like a little bit. And I was like, Mom, that works. She goes, what did you have to lose? $0. You either like don't get your kid either doesn't go. She's like, and the parts that she's like, we can always make up what's missing. You can always find it. So it's kind of something, even though it applies to being a parent, kind of applies to everything, which is like, you lose nothing from asking.
Yeah.
And also kindness goes far, and also clarity. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't say
exactly what you want.
Yeah, say what you want, but also I think people tend to do things, be it in life or career, where they say like, they'll like leave a job because they'll say like, oh, like I'm not making enough money. And then they'll say, hey, can you give me a raise? And the person's like, no. But they don't ask like, can you meet me halfway? They say, when will you be able to? They also don't ask, which is actually something the more important thing is I think people are so directed towards having more and more and more and more for our children, more for ourselves, more career, more life, whatever, instead of doing the reverse of what I've been doing recently, which is like, what's the minimum of what I need? Like, it's so freeing to go, you know what? In order to pay for school and to eat and to live in my apartment, keep the lights on. This is the bottom where I can still like, I can still like take a walk and, it's not like I'm not doing all the things. I don't have all, but like, to be honest, I'm 41 years old. The stuff I've got, I don't need. What do I need? My feet haven't grown in 40 years. The shoes all fit. You know what I mean? So like, what can I need in that? But it's freeing when you're not going, if I could just make $1 million, you're like, I don't need $1 million.
Right.
And then a lot of people that all they do is they focus on getting the money and the $1 million or whatever. And they're not thinking about all the stuff that's priceless that you can't buy, your time, your energy, all of that stuff. And you end up living a less full life with more money and nowhere to be, where you could have been like, hey, I'd rather work part-time and make less. Right. Or I'd rather work for myself and make more, but I'll have more responsibility, and kind of having those priorities. And I think
it's the opportunity cost, having less, but then you have time to spend with your family or your your child,
I mean, but it's like that's the whole thing too. Is it having less? Because, like I said, there are a lot of
That's true. Yeah.
associates I have, especially at my age, where I'm like, oh, like I'm one of the weirdly like only people who had a kid, which I don't suggest it or one way or the other. That's for more. Is they're selling you lies, people. They're selling you lies. Love them. Okay, but there are a lot of people that have a lot of stuff and they have a lot of money, but then you look around and you say, do you have friends? Yeah. Do you have people that will, as life gets harder and we have all these career accomplishments, and then you go around and you say, oh, but what would anyone say? I mean, it's kind of morbid, but like, what would anyone say if you weren't here? And would it be, Kanyessa McMahon, she produced lots of content for Nike and Adidas, and she was an asshole. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or do you want him to say that,
Yeah, it's the latter half of that people will actually remember. Not so much that, oh, you did all this wonderful work, but that, oh, this wasn't such a great person to actually work with because of their attitude. So, like, you talk about your mom, and she seems to have such a big influence on how you view life. And you also have a cousin who was a big time Sony cousin, Sony Records, who was instrumental in a lot of your decision making earlier on in
Kanye. Oh, yeah, she just texted me because I work with her now. I work with her now
forever.
No. I mean, she's my cousin, Karen Veazey. She's amazing icon, executive, and a manager. She managed Pharrell at one point. She's now a partner at 360. She manages an artist named Meta, and I help her with that now. She's been in the business, I don't know, 30 years, but she's also only 35 years old. So it's that's another part of the reason why she's so iconic is clearly she's been in the industry only the amount of her age.
Oh, I didn't realize she was that young. You made it sound like
not that young. Like, she's not that young. She's not that young, but she's also not that old. Is my point. In this family, we never age.
Never. Well, she had some really sage advice for you in your career, and talk about that.
When I was at Sony, there was a moment where I was like, I don't know where I want to go. I've got this graduate degree, which, to be honest, I think was a little bit, not a mistake is not the right word, but I just didn't want, I was like, I'm in school and like, I'll just stay in school. And I went from having zero debt to those 2 years of college debt, which was dumb. But I've never hit a academic ceiling because of it, which someone at Sony, this woman named Sparkle Watson, she said to me once, I said, I kind of regret this. She said, no. She's like, because not that you ever want to be, but there's a point when you get to certain places and certain corporate ladders where they go, and do you have a master's degree? And you're like, no, but I've worked and I know everything, and I've worked here for 20 years and I'm the only person who knows how to do this. And so if I ever wanted to be more corporate, I'll never hit that ceiling. But anyway, so Karen said, what do you want to do in life? And I said, I don't know. I'm not really sure. At the time, I was only, how old was I? 24, 25. And she said, you have to evaluate all of the things you want in life, not just money. Like, sometimes you can make lateral moves. So you're not going to make more, but you might have access to more opportunities. And you may have, the time I was like, more money would be great. I was like, but I was in a department where they had like an art department and they had a video department, and these things didn't cross. So you were like, even though I was interested in video, it also didn't make marketing sense because these things would also look so wildly different from each other. I'm like, you guys aren't talking. It's like, here are my opportunities. I can only do like photo stuff and the art packaging. Beyond just the work part, I was like, I'd really like to be someplace where, like, if I say something, I'll be listened to. I really would like a door. I had a glorious, not even a cubicle. It was like a large hallway. Okay. And it was like fun. I had like 3 computers, like multiple refrigerators, but it was like, there was no doors and it was just big and out there. I was like, I'd love to have a door. I'd love to be able to travel. I'd love to be able to work on things and people know that I worked on it, because I think sometimes, especially in corporate environments, there are a lot of people that are working on stuff and then their bosses' names go on things. Even if it's small or big, be in an environment where they say, oh, everyone thanks to everybody, not just myself. And so she was like, she's like, it's important to say things that you're interested in, even if you don't have a path there, because if you don't say it out loud, people won't hear it. So people will say it, even to me, they'll be like, oh, like I had this job that you would have been great for, but like, you're so busy and like you would never do that. We don't have the budget for it. I was like, don't get out of my brain. Like you're saying I was too busy and it's too low money, but I've been sitting here by myself and I'm bored. I'm here with my 9-year-old. I would have gladly done it for free just for the mental sharpening. You know what I mean? And so people can make assumptions about what your goals are, especially when you want to pivot, especially when you say, you know what, I'd rather make the same amount of money and have more responsibility, but then be able to have this new direction, which at the time I went from being an assistant, in the photo department. Sony was going to give me they were like, oh, the guy who had to say it like choked up. He's like, give you a cost of living raise. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, you'll get 3 levels of title change. I was like, awesome. And then we're going to give you $150. I was like, more for what? They're like, cost of living. I was like, oh, a week, a month. They were like, for the year. And I was like, ha 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 ha. And I had to laugh at that. I had my letter in my pocket that I was actually going to quit. And I was like, da-da. But I liked that job. But she said, you have to say like, hey, I want to do video stuff or that or whatever. Otherwise, when those opportunities come up, they're not thinking like, you know what?
Yeah, exactly.
Someone said to me the other day, like, I'm in finance, but I really want to get like, I'd PA on one of your sets. And I was like, really? They're like, yeah, like it's something I always wanted to do, but you keep, especially the more life you have, it's really hard to go, okay, now I've got a husband, now I've got a kid. Now I'm at the point in my career where the pivot's going to hurt. Like you have to make parallel moves are easier to do the younger you are, but a parallel move becomes harder if you're, not that I'm there, if you're like a VP or something, then you're like to move.
Well, it only becomes harder based on what you've built your lifestyle up to be. Like if you're used to a particular kind of lifestyle and then you no longer have this money coming in to support that lifestyle, then it's like, ugh. But I think I always say that I feel like it's about the passion. And after the pandemic, I feel like more people are willing to go for what it is that they want because they realize how unpredictable life is, how short life is, and how all the other stuff really doesn't matter. You have to do like what makes you happy, what fills you up. And speaking of that, you started production in your 20s. And you had your own production company called Suddenly There, and you have a very interesting story about your grandmother helping you name your production company, which I think is great. I came across you, as I mentioned, and you were in one of the most iconic magazines, not just in it, but on the cover of it, of Black culture. So there's Essence, there's Ebony, and then there's Black Enterprise. And you're on the cover of Black Enterprise in like your early 20s. I'm like, who is this person?
I know, it's like real
How
Christmas.
can I get in touch with her?
I missed that blonde. That blonde my hair was holding on by a wing and a prayer, but
it was looking good. It was looking
you could see when they were trying to go around it with the Photoshop, but I was like, woo! I needed a little conditioning treatment.
Did you buy like several copies of that magazine and just hold on to it? Did everyone in your family?
I would get up. I think that I feel like 1 second. I'm going to show you a pile of them. Just like I've got all my siblings. They're on the cover of Vogue or whatever, and I have all of theirs piled up. And then I had my grandma. Speaking of iconic Audrey Shockley, has like you come in and there's like on the coffee table, it's got like my sister's 2 Vogue covers, and then I'm like, and there's me like laughing, which is
your mom did a good job. So kudos to your mom. She raised some great kids who are in entertainment and landing on the cover of magazines. Like,
I'm no one's model, but that cover's funny. I actually think about that cover and it's strange, only because there's a part of me that's like, because like something wealth issue, which honestly, like I didn't have, I work really hard and I guess for my age, but like but it's like me laughing and it's like unstoppable, like young wealth. And I'm like, haha, poor people. And I'm like, I have no money. Well, who am I laughing at? Why am I on this cover? Like I'm somebody's like what? I think it was a young wealth or something. I don't know.
Foreshadowing. It was definitely a foreshadowing. What made you fall in love with directing? And obviously you have your own production company, so I'm sure you do a little bit of producing.
I actually, until not long ago, I mean, right before the pandemic, would have never called myself a director. I'm very much producer leaning because I started my company really and truly got slightly bullied into it by this woman, Dorinda Ross. I think she still works for Nike. She's an icon. I did that lateral move from Sony and within 2 months was like, ooh, this isn't going to work out because the guy was bouncing my paycheck. So I was like stressed, working all the time, being in that time too. I think it's, we've now had a reckoning with how we treat people. But all of the old, like stereotypes of like entertainment people being abusive, that was happening. And my husband one day said to me, he was like, so you're working all the time, miserable, and your paychecks are bouncing. So why don't you just quit? And you could be like, have zero of that, still have no money, and be doing nothing. He's like, and then I don't have to hear about it.
And you missed the part about also being happy. You wouldn't have to be miserable.
Yeah, you don't have to be miserable and unpaid and like there's none of it. He's like, not have a job. And he's like, you're not even getting paid for this nonsense. And there was a woman named Dorinda Ross who was my client at Nike at the time. And it was a company that was only men, but there was it was a women's program. So I was kind of this younger girl, kind of, that was the connection to the women's content. And Dorinda's like, hey, Kanya, your email's bouncing. I'm like, well, about that. Funny story. I don't work there anymore. And she's like, oh, no, you do work there. I was like, no, I don't. She's like, I'm going to make sure I'm going to call them and tell them you work there. I'm like, please don't call them. I don't want to. And so she ended up having this moment, which is like, I've told this story before and I'll always tell and always be really grateful to Dorinda. She said same thing, kind of like to the Karen. She was like, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I said, look, I'm probably going to go back to Sony. And I was like, and maybe 5 years when I've got some more experience, I will, maybe I'll try doing something on my own. And she said, why don't you do that now? And I was like, well, because I'm sitting here, I've got no money, no clients, no nothing, but I do have my slight sanity because I quit. And she said, well, what if she's like, well, you have a client. I said, I don't have a client. She goes, now you do. She's like, Nike's your client. Call me tomorrow. And I said, I don't have a company. She goes, figure it out and call me when you have a company. I was like, excuse you? She hangs up. And I'm like, what even just happened? I don't even know how do you do this? You go on the internet, you get like an LLC. It's like my last name, my maiden name is Hishimu and my first name is Kanyessa. So like, there's nothing cute about, you can't brand that. I'm not gonna be like Lulu agents. Like this is not Kanyessa. It's just not gonna work. And so I called my grandma, who's now 98 and also an icon. She does all these shoots and stuff with us and flies and goes. She's fabulous. And she came up with the name of my company. She said, how about Suddenly There? And I was like, I got nothing else. She's like, yeah, because look, you want a company, now you're suddenly there. So that was kind of how that started. But it also, in terms of like the context of these stories, I'm saying even Karen or Dorinda or people just being like kind of like, what do you have to lose? And also when there's an opportunity, like when anyone says, like my first client was Nike and I worked there for a couple of years and I didn't know anything. So like what was a corporate holiday for those few years? I worked every single day. I, in retrospect, I thought I was getting paid so much money. And I was, to be honest. But on the flip side, I wasn't, because there were agencies that I was working with, or they were ending up not working because I was running them over. And then I'd find out later, oh, they had like $1 million account. I'm like, wait, I was like, they're annoying. I'll just do it. And I wasn't asking for more money. I had no, models in that regard, but giving me opportunities that I'm like, who gets an opportunity to be like, okay. And I remember asking her like much later, like, why did you take that chance? Mm-hmm. Like, she's like, I had nothing to lose. She goes, you were either took this opportunity and were really good, or you weren't. And then I'd have been like, hey, this isn't working out. And you would have been let go, or the contract would have never been started. She goes, but she's like, I was lucky because you were really good. Yeah. But, the same way I had nothing to lose by trying it, because you don't really get the opportunity to say, hey, here's an account. You can go and talk to all these athletes and do whatever you want in that front. So when I say like, I kind of came up being a producer because I was just like 24 and they'd be like, go make content, make it good. And I'm like, all right, I'm making everything cheap. And no one's telling me to do this. I'm just figuring out how can I make as much as possible? How can I do things that I want to see and what I want to do? And then when people say, well, what are the directors you work with? Who are the directors in your production? I'm like, the producer in me was like, why would I pay for another person? Like, I came up with the idea. I've had to organize all this. I had to make the deck. I'm going to be the one who goes and does it. I love producing, but I think the parts I liked the most is, kind of been the creative part. Yeah. But more importantly, like I was saying about when all of this is over, whatever people are going to say, I love the people that I meet. I love the fact that, at the end of the day, we're making commercials. They're all branded content. It could be a $0 thing or it can be a $1 million thing. Is like, we have a fun job. We're making stuff that maybe it runs for 3 months, maybe it runs on the internet and YouTube. Like, who knows where it's going to be? But like, the experience should be positive. People should be respected. We should have a good time. And that's the stuff that lasts. Like, I think when I look at all my friends, there's so many people where it's like, oh, one of my best friends in the world, I met because I called, I said, I need a shooter to get on a plane to go to Spain tomorrow. And he was in college. And now it's like, 15, so many years later at this point, he's got a wife, he's got 2 kids. I went to his wedding, like he shows up for anything I need. And it's like, yes, the work is the work, but the people are what make it kind of the best part of it. And I think that, opportunities I have or don't have, I hope that's the takeaway. Like, am I good at my job? Shit, yeah.
2 things that are great is that you wake up and you can say that you actually love your job, but then also knowing that the person that you're working with is kind. Kindness is such a big deal to me. Like, I like to work with people that anyone likes to work with people that they like, because who wants to wake up and go to a place where you're supposed to be making money and it's tough and it's hard in life in general, and then the person that you're working with is also tough and hard and just mimicking life. It's like, no, can we just take this space that we're creating and make it a lovely space? Can we make it a kind space?
Sometimes, like, I hire people that are good at their job. I hire people that I have high expectations for. And then I'm like, I don't want to be up someone's behind, like checking on them or whatever. And also, like, I don't expect everyone to be perfect. But like, sometimes, especially in production, you're like, yo, what are you doing? Like, what's good?
Yeah.
And then later you're like, hey, by the way, you were just standing around doing jack shit. Wait. Like, love you. Smiles. Hi. Or you say, sorry. I think that's another part of being kind too, is like, this stuff can be really stressful. And like, there's the amount of times, you catch yourself crying over, I'm like, it's just a commercial. Right. Am I crying for? Like, really? Like, I'm making...
Because we know we get it right. We want everything to be... I've been there where I've, like, cried. Like, I'm like, Slade, it's not there. I don't want it to go out into the world and represent...
We spent all this money in 5 days of our life, but it's going to be on a 30...
Right. 30. I always say that when I figured out that I wanted to become a producer, because I didn't even know what producing was. I kind of fell into it because I used to sing, whatever, and I started producing like these mini shows, like AOL sessions. I'm dating myself, but I did it. I remember feeling so stressed out because I would book the studio for the artists to come, and the artists were always late. And I'm like, I'm paying, first of all, I didn't have that much money, so my check was going to the studio, and I'm like, losing money because I have to pay them for more hours at this point. And I was like, okay, producer mind, tell them that their call time is 2 hours earlier and find your zen, Maureen, because if you don't, why are you doing this? You're going to be stressed out every time you do something that is supposed to be fun for you? No, find your zen. So I agree, like, with all the chaos, you should always find like the beauty in things, the beauty in life. So by this point, you've done like 450 pieces of content when you were over at Nike. And now you're like directing for Backyarders in USA, Frank Content in Toronto, and Fresh Film Productions for UK and Asia. First of all, how does anyone work for 3 different companies as a director?
Like they have regions, they have it's like zone defense.
Okay.
Offense. Or either. Both of them. All the sports references. It's like, they've got their zone and they're kind of floating in it.
So there's no exclusivity, so you can do like more.
Well, it's a weird world out there about, how things go. For example, Fresh Films has a US division and a UK Asia division.
Yeah.
And I'm only with them for the other side of it.
Okay. That's cool.
To be honest, at this time in the world, it's like industry has shifted in lots of ways that have been good, lots of ways that have been good on the surface. I think a lot of, not nowadays, a lot of times there's this push for bidding and letting women and Black and brown women and just women in general and other people, not just, people that are not white males, everyone else except for the white men have a seat at the table. You're going to still hire the one man that you wanted to hire, but you're going to be like, look, we let that person bid or talk to us or whatever. But it's a big thing to feel and kind of get the acknowledgement of being like, oh, there are people who want to represent me and take me out in the world.
How do you get on the roster of like 3 different production companies anyway? Is that a hard like, do you pitch yourself? What's the process like?
For Frank, my sales rep, who actually is at Backyard, before he was at Backyard, now he's there and I'm there. He introduced me to that team. It's like, hey, like, here's a director that I know looking for opportunities, think that it'd be you might be a match. You choose and look for people you want to work with. There's so many companies, there's so many people, there's so many opportunities. But at the end of the day, like, if you're going to be doing things that are, like I said, fundamentally fun, but are going to have some moments, then you want to be doing it with people that are on the same page as you. There's nothing wrong with also reevaluating that as you go, because it's like marriage. You're like, are you with him or her because they're there? People like thought, like, I think what COVID did is it made people go, like, you looked over and you went, oh, I do like you, or heck, low key, I hate you. But but in regular life before COVID, you didn't have time to notice it. You're like, oh, I see you 2 hours a night, 14 hours in a week, or let's say it's 20 hours in a week. But same thing with companies, and same things when you work with production companies or otherwise. You go, oh, like, am I just here because I'm here?
Right.
And there's obviously work, and the same thing as I said in marriage, just work and finding other places. I think it's important to say, like, hey, do we actually still jive? So we have to have a meeting that reevaluates what our goals are. What do because at the end of the day, one thing I've also learned is it's great to have other people representing you, but on the flip side, the best person that's gotten the most for me has always been myself. Because at the end of the day, people can do the busy work of getting you in the door, but you still have to show up and you still have to put out your ideas. And when you're a director, it's hard because it's like, what is the tangible? Yes, there's the work you do, but so much of what we do is less the end product. All these aspects of our lives is being accountable to who we are, who we want to be, how we move through the world. And the rest of it comes out in the wash. But I think you got to stop. Same thing I said, like Karen said, like Dorinda said, you say, where do I want to be in 5 years? If you sit there and you go, hey, I'm miserable in my marriage. Okay, where do you want to be in 5 years? Do you want to be with the same person and in a better place? Do you go, you know what? I actually don't want to be with this person. Okay. Does it mean, or does it say, hey, you know what? I actually don't know if I want to be with them or not. Like same thing with a job or a career. If I was a director for the rest of my life, I'd be happy. But to be honest, I have like 5 jobs because I am a busybody. I realize I'd rather be able to have a lot of balls in the air that keep me diversified and having other opportunities, so I don't feel like, hey, I'm a really good producer, but now I'm just a director. So like, that's all I do. Where I manage my brother as a musician. He's also a professional skateboarder and a model and all the things, because they're just so talented, the LSS. But nonetheless, it's like, but kind of like, am I like, hey, I want to be a manager? No. Am I really good at it? Yeah. The reason I'm good at it is, one, he's my brother, and I also work with other people, but it's like, because I care about people. I want people to be comfortable. It's harder to fight for yourself than it is to fight for other people. And I'd rather things be positive and right and not just for the sake of like my career and pushing this person for whatever. I'm like, I got other things going on. I want your life and your career to be good. I want my life and my career to be good. And you know what? If that means I sleep a little less, but I get to have all these new opportunities and still meet new people and challenge myself and learn new things, then like,
do you do a lot for your siblings? Do you do a lot of like creative content for them? Or do you
I actually don't do low key. They don't even tap into what they've got. It's a damn shame. No. I mean, for my siblings, I mean, like admin, like all siblings are, all big sisters are. But I work as management for my brother. Okay. I'm a sister too, as we call us. I need to rebrand that. A sister just doesn't hit. Someone else, anyone out in the world have a new
I don't think
hashtag.
anyone's actually using that term, so it kind of works. It makes you like sister. Okay, I haven't heard that. You hear momager.
Is it nepotism if I'm good? Like, I'm good.
Right.
So, and also, if I know you, then I'm really going to kill myself because I'm not trying to. What we will not be doing is embarrassing anyone on their name. The same way I would hope that if I said, "Hey, Maureen, you're gonna come do this podcast," don't embarrass me. Which means I have faith in you. I have confidence in you that you can go in the world and will work hard. And so I think it's just sometimes it's hard to see people in different ways.
Right. You have experience under your belt. What are some of your personal projects or passion projects that you are personally working on?
So right now I've been kind of more focused in like the music management space and also figuring out, kind of tying in all of these different backgrounds I have, be it,
What's your
content.
vision for that if you're in music management right now?
I think sometimes people are just good at things. And that could, like a lot of producing, it's like I always say the best assistant, a lot of people who are assistants want to be lifers and they're assistants. But I'm like, if you are a really good assistant and you can be a $1 million producer, I think it's because it's about organizations, it's about your natural inclinations to things. I naturally care about people, and I naturally am good at organizing things, and my brain thinks in how to sort through the chaos.
Yeah. What is your goal for this artist that you're working with? Like, where do you want to take them, and how do you want to be as a manager? How do you see yourself as a manager?
It's like I said, it's a little harder. I mean, artist I manage is my brother.
Yeah.
And so, he's he's a professional athlete. He's all these things. I think a lot of it originally has come from just being a protective sister and being like, oh, what we're not going to do is mess up my brother, because I think a lot of times, especially when it's Black and brown kids, these big corporations, kids are happy to get clothes for free or this or that, and they don't know, and they don't have anyone else who knows. Like, actually, like, no. I mean, actually, it doesn't have to be a lot, but they should pay you something. Actually, do they have a release for that? I think for me, it's not even just one. Like, I realize that I am happy or busy. And I've thought about this, and it's kind of having balance. It's that if I can do one really big commercial, and sometimes I can think like, oh my God, that was hell on earth. I'm like, yeah, but it was also like, it's a commercial. I made a minute long thing. You know what I mean? That was so hard. But I do one really big commercial, and instead of thinking of it like, oh, this is really stressful or whatever, I think, actually, this is relieving me of that burden. So when someone calls me and says, hey, Kanya, I'm doing this content on Black women who are doing amazing things, I'm like, we don't know if we can afford. I'm like, oh, I don't have to do it for money because I did that commercial over there. So it's like thinking about things as like a balanced ecosystem that allows me to help people and get to know other people. I think that like that's honestly, like, it seems really weird and like basic, but like that's the thing I think of when I think of any story of any commercial I've done. I'll always say, like, I'll tell stories about the people I met. Like when I was on Ford, a bunch of those women that were in the commercial, the people who were behind the scenes, like, I'm still friends with them. And I'm not like a top director by any stands, but I think like, I've made $20,000 in it for a day and worked multiple days. And I've made $0 because I just want to do it. There's a lot of stuff that you'd work on that was literally $1 million commercial, and you'd be like, oh, so you're making a lot of money. And you're like, that's the one I'm not making the money on. The reason that I appreciate myself is that, and I think I'm different in the mix, is because I come from the producer brain. I'm always like, tell me your budget and then I'll give you an idea, because I'm not trying to give you, like, a lot of directors, and I think why there's that idea of like being unreasonable. Part of it is less about the actual person, but it's like a disconnect between the money and the idea. So you're like, hey, I told you I wanted flying monkeys. And you guys were like, okay, cool. But no one said, but do you know how much we don't have flying monkey money? So in turn, what happens, they hire the person and they're like, yeah, so the monkeys are cut. They're like, what? That's the whole idea. And then like make up another, like make more idea. So I think for me, I come from like a producer's background. So I'm always like, tell me your budget and I'll tell you what we can do. And sometimes creatives will also give up their money because they go, I don't care. I want the flying monkeys. And that's how you end up with, there's musicians that are in debt over their tours because you go, how did they have a sold out tour and they're in debt? It's like, well, because they wanted the flying monkeys. And so you're making millions of dollars, but you're spending twice that. I have been on a set where I literally said I was getting paid a lot. You do not pay me enough to do that. I have a kid. I need this money. Be willing and know that we're just doing stuff for commercials and brand is like, you have to live with yourself. So don't treat people crazy. Don't say, well, oh, I was working with this director and she told me to go over there and say, what the f-? If it's me, I go, hey, so excuse me, pardon me, can you, I don't care what they told me because I'm not, like, they're not paying me enough, especially when you're coming up, especially when you're a PA. They're paying you $150, $250. That person who maybe overhears you, me as a director, that department head told you to go over there and act crazy. I hear it. All I think is, you're absolutely not, that person's never on my set. So if that's who you are, that's who you are. Roll through life that way. But if that's not who you are, you never let people, whatever the job is, take you away from the core of who you are. I shocked myself when I turned around on that set. I was like, oh, just so you know, I don't get paid enough for this. I'm going to have to go home now. They were like, oh, what do you mean? I was like, that's where I never thought I'd see it. I had it in my head that this was the line, but I thought that could never happen because people aren't trash. I bet here you are. I met you. But like, I think that it's important to know, especially when you're in situations and you want to weigh in, that's the part of where people take advantage of people because they know you want to weigh in.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. I appreciate all of you, and I'd love for you to subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you in the next video.